but some circumstances prevent her from doing that tonight. So she was here very briefly, but then she's now off to where she needs to be. But what I'm going to present here is work that Nuala and I have been doing for the last year and a half or so, I guess. Work that Nuala actually started about 3 years ago when we started introducing OSM in the classroom. And initially it was started with just the intermediate GIS class that she was teaching. It started with just talking about open source in a general sense, and then when OSM, or when she became aware of OSM, she thought this would be a great exercise for her students to get involved with. So over the last couple of years, it's just the intermediate class that was being involved with this classroom work with OSM, but just this semester actually we got our intro classes involved as well. So we teach two intro classes in cartography and GIS. So these are people who have never done GIS before, are completely new to the ideas of vector data and topology and geospatial techniques. So we wanted to get these guys involved, and the OSM community and the software used to get people engaged with that community has evolved, so we thought it was a good fit to introduce our intro classes to that. We're also planning to continue to include OSM with our program at GW in geography. Not only will we continue in the undergrad program, but we have a graduate certificate coming online next year, and open source technologies will be included with that as well, including an elective on open source technologies entirely. All right, so how have we been doing with OSM in the classroom so far? Well, it sort of started in earnest about 3 or 4 years ago when Nuala was teaching our intermediate GIS class, as I was mentioning. And she wanted to include OSM, and so she looked at the natural disaster sort of watch list. And then she looked at OSM and looked at what communities were not very well represented. She found Chittagong, Bangladesh. There's only a few roads in there, and she said this would be a great spot. We can go in and get our students mapping that area, because obviously it needs to be done. It was a lot of work on her part, because there weren't a lot of tools to help her get this up and running, and she really had no guidance as to how to implement this. So she was really flying off the seat of her pants and sort of developing as she goes. Following that, the next year she was in touch with a former graduate of our program at the International Services Branch at the Red Cross, Robert Bannock. And he had approached her and said, hey, with open source, do you think we could do a project? Because I have people in country that we want to teach quantum GIS to. And quantum GIS is, for those who aren't aware, is an open source GIS platform. So she said, yeah, we can work something out. So what she had her intermediate GIS class again do was create field labs. So essentially what the class had to do was teach themselves a couple of tools in quantum, and then write a lab that would teach somebody else how to use those same tools. By the end of the class, by the end of this lab, when you put all those together, you'll have a sort of a working manual for quantum that Robert could then take and bring in country and say, okay, we're going to be using quantum GIS for our work. This is how you use the tools. So again, the students got to exposure to open source technologies, and in this case, quantum GIS. And it actually was benefiting people in country working with the Red Cross. Last year was when I sort of got involved, and again with a GIS class, we were approached by the Red Cross. They were working with their counterparts in Colombia and in Indonesia, who had identified locations that were not very feature-rich when it comes to OpenFreeMap and the details that were in there. And they were concerned with these areas because they were looking at their disaster risk reduction mitigation measures, and they wanted to use OSM data to help facilitate their mandates. So we partnered with them, and they, Red Cross, had identified these areas for us to work, and then we sort of gridded out the area and parsed it out to the students and had them develop that. This semester, we partnered with USAID and the World Bank in their Open Cities project. And this year, as I was mentioning previously, is the first time, this semester was the first time we had the intro classes actually taking part of this. And what we did is actually ramped it up, so we had 4 classes in our program take part. We had 2 of the intro to cartography and GIS, the intermediate GIS class, and our class on GIS and disaster response, or emergency response. I can't remember the exact name. So there's 4 classes, so we're looking at going from intermediate GIS class, which had about 30 students, to this semester when we had 80+ students involved with this project. So it's quite the ramp up. And very recently, as in this week, we've been working with the Red Cross again, tracing features in the Philippines. this week from this past Tuesday to continue till tomorrow from noon to 2 o'clock in our lab. Pardon me. We'll be hosting mini mapathons, and we put the word out to our listserv, and today we had 12 or 13 people coming in, students, past students. We have a couple guys from USAID come in on our lunch break. Just come in, trace some features. There are a number of jobs been set up and areas identified that need tracing. So we've had a number of students, alumni, and people in the industry coming in and just taking their lunch break and tracing out this work for the Red Cross. In the background, myself and Neil have also been working with Robert Bannock at the Red Cross and doing some cleanup of the data as the sit reps come in, and so that they can then be geocoded and then made into maps. Because obviously they're going through a flurry of work right now. So that's work and the partners we've had so far to date. So getting OSM into the classroom is sort of two main components as we see it. First one is the preparation part on the instructor. So the first thing we need to do is obviously identify an area of interest. When we're working with a partner, that makes it sort of much easier because they have an area of interest where they want us to focus our attention and where they want to focus our students' work. The next thing is we need to divvy up that work area, okay, into some grid system. HOT Tasking Manager. HOT is the humanitarian OpenFreeMap team. Tasking Manager wasn't around when Nuala did the first one in Bangladesh, but has since come out last year when we did the one in with Colombia and Indonesia. And basically it helps you organize and focus your work area and help you divvy up the work. And then we need to decide on how much work do we give the students. We want to make sure they give them enough because they are getting credit for it. So we want to make sure that they're getting enough work to be worth credit for this class. But of course we don't want to overtax them and stress them out and give them so much they're not going to complete it, or stress that they're not going to complete it. So it's a bit of a balancing act. And this workflow that we're going through has changed greatly from when Nuala first started. It's changed since last year when we did it with the intermediate class, and we expect it'll change again the next time we do it. So the second big thing is actually engaging the students. So we've done our prep work of getting this set up. Now we need to get the students involved and get them up to speed. So the first thing we've been doing is from the beginning of our classes is sort of introducing the idea that you have this OpenStreetMap project coming up and you'll be working with a partner. This year it was as USAID with the Open Cities Project and World Bank, as I was mentioning. And a big part of that was having somebody from that organization come in and talk to our students. But leading up to that point, we've been mentioning it periodically, especially after we've had meetings, we're narrowing down the area and the scope of what we're going to be doing, keep it in their mind, and letting them know that a project like this actually matters to people on the ground. It's not like you'd read a history paper. You get it back, you look at your mark, you throw it in a drawer, you never look at it again. The work you do in OpenStreetMap, of course, it goes live. Everybody can see it, and the work that you do will be used by people in country and by agencies. So what you do actually does matter. And then we get to take them through the workflow as well. Aside from giving them the big picture, we sort of task out the work. And again, the tasking manager comes into play here, so they can identify the geographic region where they're going to be working. And as part of the big picture as well, to back up for a hot second, having the speaker come in, somebody that is actually using this information and part of the project that we're contributing to, I think really adds a lot. I know my students seem to get a lot out of hearing the speaker come in and talk. This year we had Chad Blevins and Shadrach Roberts from the USAID, from the Geocenter, come in and talk to our students, tell them about the project as a whole, what they're doing. And Shadrach kept joking about if they mess up, puppies could die. So, you know, don't kill any puppies with your work. So make sure you do it correctly the first time. So getting the students' mind around what it is you're contributing to, how they're doing the work, how the work will be tasked out, how you're going to find the areas you're going to work in, and the editor that we'll be using. So we also did a demo. The editor we used this year was ID. This editor is created by Mapbox, and when we first saw it last year, we found it to be very clean and much easier and sort of consumable by people who, without any GIS background. In previous years, they had used either Potlatch or JOSM, which generally require a little more geospatial knowledge to get up and running and really be efficient with it. But I found with ID that we could probably introduce the newbies, the intro class students to it. So that's why we decided to bring in the intro class this time around. We also asked the students to keep a track, sort of a track log, if they found problems with the workflow, with the system that we're using, because again, it's changing each time. Put that in a document, and it's going to help us sort of develop this workflow as we move along. And then we have a hands-on training session. This is all leading up to the actual assignment and being assigned. We have hands-on training, so we have people with experience with ID and with the editor we're using. When we were doing using JOSM last year with the intermediate class in Cambodia and Indonesia, Ian Vaida, I think I'm pronouncing his last name right, from Mapbox was nice enough to come down and help us train the students on using JOSM. This year, Ian came down again to my class and helped us use ID and get them up and running with that, to make sure they're comfortable with the software before we actually sort of throw them into it. And then anybody who's done any tracing or digitizing knows that it's not fun or sexy work. So if you can do it in a more collaborative environment, and especially when you're new to it, you're going to have questions. And you're not used to looking at satellite imagery, because this is what we're tracing. We're looking at satellite imagery, and sometimes you need help in determining, okay, where does this building start and end, interpreting the shadows, interpreting where the road goes. So sometimes you need multiple sort of eyes looking at the same scene before you can determine where you want to digitize. So we said, okay, let's have a mapping party. We did this last year and did it again this time. We made it completely optional. We're going to host it on a Friday evening, and we want to have fun with it. So we invite people in. We tell them we'll feed them. So we had pizza, we had pop, we had ice cream, we had music going, and you have questions. And we always invite the sort of our partners that we're working with to come in. So last year, both Robert from the Red Cross came down, and Ian showed up again. And earlier from that talk, Mikkel Marin from HOT, he came in and talked to the students as well. So we had us floating around, answering questions and listening to tunes. And then this year we had another mapping party, but obviously much larger. And this time, not only USAID, but we had State Department, we had World Bank people coming in, we had faculty joining us as well. So it was quite a bit. So we have a couple of pictures here from the mapping party. This is from last year. This is just one class, the intermediate GIS class, using JOSM. This is the inside of our spatial analysis lab. We have 30 computers, so 30 workstations. Most of those were used. We have a couple of people working their laptops. They had the option to do that. And they're sitting in front of a computer, and right around 9 o'clock, there was 2 or 3 students left hanging around. And he said, "Richard, you're kicking us out." I'm like, "Yes, get out. It's Friday night. You're a university student. What are you doing in class at 9 o'clock on a Friday? And I need to go for a beer, so you need to get out." So we did that, and we cleaned up, and it was a well done project. Fast forward to this year, now we have 4 classes, upwards of 80 students. We even had 4 students or 5 students from Georgetown come and try it out. Nuala, the previous 2 Saturdays, had been doing a GIS module with their foreign service graduate students. And she told them about it, so she asked them if they, invited them to come along if they wished. 4 or 5 of them showed up. We had some alumni show up. We had, of course, faculty show up and do things. And then in the center there, you can see a picture of a group of us. I don't remember everybody's first and last name, so I'm not going to remember everybody. But we had John Crowley from GFDRR, Kerry Stokes, director of the Geocenter at USAID, Nuala, myself, Shadrach Roberts from USAID, Josh Campbell from State Department, and Vivian, whose name I cannot remember. Pardon me? Depardieu with World Bank. They all showed up, as well as many other people, and just to see what was going on. As you can see, we had not only the computers in the upper left area, we have not only the computers all around the perimeter of the room filled, but we have our desks in the middle filled with laptops, and people were working away. Literally, we had 80 plus, maybe even 90 plus students and mappers coming through the evening. And we probably mapped about upwards of 10,000 features through this project, probably maybe closer to 15,000. We're waiting for the final numbers because Chad Blevins took a sort of shot of OpenFreeMap before the project started, and he took another one once we sort of finished the project. And they haven't had time to really focus on getting those metrics out yet, but they're going to hopefully get it in the next week or so. So why is OSM different than in the classroom than anywhere else? Well, firstly, people who usually contribute to OSM, they're simply on their own time. They log in, they find a spot they want to work, they trace some features, and then they go to bed at night. You don't have to worry about anything else. For us, of course, we're making it to assignment. So we have to deal with things when we're deal with various things such as the variant density within an image. students, if they're stuck with high density areas, may be hard to distinguish features as opposed to low density features or low density areas. How do we grid it out? Do we provide grids to people? Do we say, you get 5 grid cells to do, and or do you give a quota? You have to do so many features. With JOSM last year, with the intermediate GIS class, they were given, I think, 4 high density and 5 low density cells to do between Indonesia and Colombia. This year we decided to go with quota, so we had every student had to create 150 individual features. They could be line features, building features. Predominantly they were going to be building structures, but they had to do 150 individual pieces of infrastructure. If they did more, we gave them a little extra credit. So we encouraged them to do more. And I believe one of NULA students actually digitized something like 1,000 features. Obviously a lot of time on our hands. But great work. We also need to track who did what. Now when you work in OSM, every edit you make, every change you make is tagged with your OSM handle. So it's very easy to track it. But with Tasking Manager, you also have a checkout system. So you choose a geographic area to use, and then you sort of check it out, and no one else can check out that geographic area in Tasking Manager while you have it checked out. And then of course we have to figure out how we need to grade it. There's all these extra steps and things to think about when you're using it in the classroom setting, as opposed to the generic Joe Mapper who wants to go in and just digitize a few features because he feels like contributing. So next is just the basic sort of workflow, and I'm probably running a little long. All right, so I'm going to move it along. Basic workflow of how we've sort of evolved things to date for when we have new students coming in, and eventually Newell and I want to create this module that we'll be putting up on this potential site of Teach OSM. I'll talk about that in a hot second. So the first thing obviously is create an OSM account if you don't already have one. When you do so, you simply provide your email. You can create your own handle. So if you want to be unimaginative like myself, it's my initials and my last name. If you want to be something more creative, you can be like McLovin Mapper or something like that. And every edit you create, everything you do will be labeled with McLovin Mapper. Once we've had them create their OSM account, we get them in OSM, and we get them to zoom in and use the ID editor. Well, more accurately, launch ID editor. And then Mapbox have created this walkthrough, which is a great quick demo and getting people up and using ID editor. How to create points, how to create lines, how to create polygons. So we get them to use that so they're familiar with the tools and how to add information. Now Tasking Manager, this is one I was mentioning before, it's a different window, it's a different website altogether. OpenFreeMap is a great collaborative tool for getting infrastructure created and getting information up online quickly, make it available for people to use. But there's no way to organize workflows. So if you have a focus group looking at a focus group of workers want to work in a particular geographic area, this is one way of working with that and sort of dividing up the work. You can log into Tasking Manager with your OSM account, find a job that's been created, and zoom in and find a square and start working away. You need an admin account to create these jobs, and Noodle was given one just for this last project with USAID. So once you get into Tasking Manager, you log in, you find the job you want to work on, and we had our students working on Kathmandu, and we had them all choose Area 1. Once you do that, you come to the next window where you actually have a map on the right-hand side. Normally it's zoomed out. This is a zoomed-in version, but when you first go in, you'll see the entire geographic area, and you'll see the grid that has been created. Once you select, you see in the middle the grid that's selected as orange, that's the one that's been selected. So you find the geographic area you want to work in, you select it, then you click ID. And this will automatically launch OSM into an ID session. Now one of the things we're working with is that the geographic area you checked in Tasking Manager, which is one window, does not exactly match the geographic area shown in Tasking Manager, in OSM, sorry. You see it in the center, but then you get a lot of more geographic information around it. So what we had students do was zoom in to identify their area. Because you have somebody else that's taken the cell next to you, you don't want to be digitizing the same feature because you'll get conflicts. Okay, so we want people to zoom in and identify exactly where their area is, and we had them take a screenshot so they can keep that, or we asked them to take a screenshot so they can sort of keep that visual reference so as they're moving around, because it's very easy to follow a road, digitize building, 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 before you know it, you're 2 cells over. And then you can't reconcile because the building's already been digitized with somebody else. So as they're digitizing, We ask them to save their edits after every feature they created. This will help avoid conflicts. And every piece of infrastructure they create, they'll want to mark it as a building or as a road. And we also had them add the hashtag GW Mapathon that Friday night when we were doing this. And then, as I mentioned before, an edit log. If they come across things that were frustrating, that were troublesome, that they had problems with, take screenshots, mention it, and we'll sort of look at that and address that once we get a chance to sort of read through all this. Because it's all going to help us improve the workflow. So, as I mentioned, the workflow is evolving. And this year we surveyed our students to get a better understanding of their experience, because we want to improve this, as I was mentioning. And Newell and I have sort of committed to the OSM community that we will package this, package this whole process up into a module that then anybody can use, and eventually, hopefully, get it onto something called Teach OSM, which doesn't really exist yet. We have recently applied for a grant to get some money to potentially start the ball rolling on Teach OSM. And we're thinking of maybe having another task manager type device, but more for educational use as part of it. Because eventually we'd like to see this thing in a package that anybody could use. If you're in public health and you want to get your people contributing to OSM, you could take this package without any GIS background, without knowing proprietary software knowledge, using all open source, and get your students mapping and collaborating and getting information onto the web in through OSM. Or even high school teachers, if they had a geography class, you want to get them involved with service learning. So we expand it to different people, different disciplines, and we want to provide the training materials and sort of simplify the whole process so somebody can take this module and carry on with it. As I was mentioning at the top, we're going to continue to grow the open source education with our students, both at the undergrad and the graduate level. The certificate program that we're launching next year in 2014 is the graduate level GIS certificate. We will have an elective in that course, or in that program rather, which is completely open source. The other classes, the gateway classes, will have open sources as component, open source technologies and resources as components, but there will be a class completely on open source as a plan at this time. I know I ran a little long, speeding up, that's all I got. Any questions?